Welcome to Inside the Indians, your source for insider information on the Tribe. Stay with us as we bring you the latest about the players, managers, and people behind the scenes at Victory Field. Now here's your host, the longtime broadcast voice of the Indians, Howard Kellman.
Hi everybody. On today's show, we'll talk to manager Brian Esposito, pitching coach Brian Hickerson, and catcher Jacob Stallings. We'll be back with Espo on WHMB TV 40. Esposito, the manager of Indianapolis Indians, our first guest on Inside the Indians. Espo, let's go back to the last homestand. Okay, bases loaded, top of the ninth, 2 men out, and the Indians, with catcher Jacob Stallings, pulled off a pickoff play, picked the man off at first. Tell us about that.
You know, in that situation, as a catcher, especially a premium catcher like Stallings is that you know, your job is to help that reliever get through innings, help find ways to get outs, and when they're not helping themselves, sometimes there are opportunities to steal outs on the bases, and he did exactly that. You know, he knew where that pitcher was at that particular moment. There was an opening to be able to try to backpick that guy and steal an out, and you know, everything worked out perfect. You know, he was on line, we get the back pick, and we give ourselves a chance to save ourselves from a big inning and then come back into the dugout and try to, you know, catch up in that game. So those are situations where you talk about your elite catchers. They find ways to get outs, whether it's at the plate or on the bases.
Okay, so based on what you said, it was Jacob's idea. Do you sometimes call that from the dugout too?
No, those are things that are hard to do. I mean, there are certain things that I could give him, but you know, most of the catchers are able to see all those things as they're in front of them. They understand the situation of the game. These are a lot of things that we talk about as far as taking these risks and taking these opportunities. You know, we're already down by 3 at that point. If we take a chance to get an out and, you know, let's say the ball gets thrown to the right field corner, big deal. You know, there's going to be another opportunity where that's going to happen, where we get that guy and you give your team a chance to do some things. So it's the risk versus reward. The one thing I do is promote the opportunity for risk. That's an opportunity where he's got to take it. It's bases loaded. The way the game was going at that time, the odds were not in our favor for that reliever to get that particular hitter out, and we got to stealing out on the bases.
Yes, the count had gone to 2-0. It's a great play, but it's even more impressive when you consider there's a right-hand batter at the plate. I mean, if there's a left-hand hitter up there, that's when you see it pulled sometimes, because he'll obstruct the base runner. But right-hand hitter, you know, he saw what was in front of him. He still got him easily. You
know, nowadays the way that teams are positioning certain players with a right-handed hitter in the batter's box, those first basemen are playing off towards that 3-4 hole. So those runners at first base tend to seem to get a little bit bigger of a lead than they need to. And if you're on the same page with your first baseman, that's an easy back pick right there. The reality of that situation was that's one of their better hitters, and who I believe was hitting in the 4 or 5 hole. You know, if you have the 9 hitter up right there and you're expecting to get this guy out, you might want to, you know, the risk doesn't seem as prevalent. But when you got 4 or 5 in the batter's box, especially if they're coming in hot, those are the times you take that risk, and he took it, and it worked out to our favor.
Now, from Columbus's perspective, the runner's going nowhere. He's the trail runner. Right. And you coach first base. Are you really picking off the first base coach, too, in that situation?
Yeah, there's a lot of people with their guard down in that particular situation. You know, there is no place for him to go. That's where we you know, you talk about winning up front. As an organization, we like to win up front. They did not win up front right there. Winning up front doesn't always mean having the largest lead. It could mean having the smartest lead. If he shortens up his lead and he gets a better secondary, he's going to put himself in a position to be able to score from first base if there's a ball in the gap. That big lead right there just kind of hung him out to dry, hung the first base coach out to dry, and we were able to capitalize on their mistakes.
Let's talk about shifts now. Let's talk about when the Indians are on offense, because some teams are using them, not as much as the Indians are. But how do you want your hitters to approach things? Let's say you're down 2 or 3 runs, and there's nobody on. You're leading off an inning. Your job is to get on base, and there's a shift. What would you like to see your hitter do?
Well, you know, this is the battle that we're facing right now, where we talk to our guys of base runners. You know, we need base runners. How you get on base doesn't matter. You know, back in the day, it was about working the count and drawing walks. Walks are as good as a hit. If a team is going to expose themselves to a bunt or a ball that's put in play and we're able to get runners on base, then by all means do it. Are we looking for hits, or are we looking for base runners? And that's what it really boils down to. If I'm down 3 runs, I need base runners. You know, a double or a home run, it doesn't really matter right there. But if we continue to pass that baton and get on base, a bunt, you know, works just fine. Being able to push a ball against a shift works just fine. So for me, base runners are more important than the actual art of just getting hits. What's more important at that time? So we want to be unpredictable. If a team is going to give us a bunt and we're able to get it down, we'll go ahead and get it down. If there's 2 outs, we ran into that situation with Jason Martin the other day in the game where, you know, there's 2 outs and he's able to put a bunt down. We're down 2 runs. If your skill set allows you to get a bunt down, what's the difference if you swing and pop up or put a bunt down and you're out on the bunt? The reality is, as long as you're trying with intent to get on base, then what's the difference?
I also think laying down a bunt can often disrupt a pitcher's rhythm and affect him.
No doubt. You know, you show bunt, sometimes it gets their focus off some things. We've seen a ton of times where, especially in this league, you see pitchers bunting in the National League game all the time where it's hard to throw a strike after they show bunt. They're just trying to aim it and get it over the plate. So it's all about being unpredictable. It's all about putting your team in a better position to win a ball game.
You mentioned scoring runs, getting on base as opposed to just getting hits. And Kevin Young, his new title is offensive coordinator. We talked to him on the road trip. And I think that's great because it's about playing winning baseball, not just necessarily trying to hit.
Yeah, you know, what's important, you know, the only way you win this ball game nowadays is by scoring runs. In order to score runs, your physical body has to be on base in order to step on it. So not everyone's going to be able to drive the ball to the ballpark on 3-run homers. So how do we get ourselves in a better position? We got to find ways to get on base, and that's by any means necessary.
Well, I think it's really impressive when guys work and play as a team and do things like that, and it bonds you and brings guys together.
Yeah, there are certain things that I notice that players do on their own, whether they give each other signs, who's going to bunt for a base hit, what to be aware of. You know, runner on third base, you know, it might not come from the bench to put, you know, a squeeze play on or a safety squeeze, but that hitter might tell the guy on third base, hey, listen, I'm going to take advantage of a weak link on defense. Be prepared. You know, I've seen that before. I've done that before in my career. I think the game has gotten away from that a little bit, but I think that those are ways that teams, like you said, bond, teams get together, and they go out and they play winning baseball.
You mentioned Jacob Stallings earlier with that pickoff play, and he has really developed into a good player.
Yeah, total package. You know, he knows who he is. He's comfortable with his at-bats. He's comfortable with who he is behind the plate. He doesn't try to do too much. He stays in his lane and just goes out there and competes really hard.
Yeah, I like the fact he'll go to the opposite field. He knows that's where he can get his base hits.
Yeah, it starts with his day and how he prepares for a game. You know, in an era where the balls seem to be a little bit loaded up from what people say and guys try to drive the ball to the ballpark, his approach in his BP and his cage routines, you know, he's just trying to be who he is, and he finds the barrel to the ball and he hits it where it needs to be hit. So it shows up in the game at 7 o'clock. He's a guy that sometimes has, you know, minimal at-bats within a day's span, but yet he still stays competitive when he gets in the batter's box.
As always, thank you so much, Espo.
My pleasure.
Brian Esposito on the home of the Indians, WHMB TV 40. Hickerson, the Indianapolis Indians pitching coach, our next guest on Inside the Indians. And Brian, during the last homestand, you got a big lift from a right-hander up from AA, Dario Agrazal. Tell us about him.
Well, Dario's been one of those guys that's a strike thrower, puts the ball on the ground, has a good sinker, slider, changeup, and great competitor. And over the last couple seasons, he hasn't completed full seasons, and so we're looking forward to this year, him being out there from April all the way through the end of the season to see what he can do.
The thing I noticed immediately is he worked quickly, and the players, the defense, loves that.
They do. He's always been a quick worker, and again, he's a strike thrower, so it keeps the defense in it because they're going to put the ball in play. He's not a big strikeout pitcher, but he is a weak contact pitcher, and of course, we like games like that because they usually don't last as long, too.
That's right. Now, Mitch Keller has pitched much better. Tell us about Mitch and your feelings on him as a pitcher.
Oh, he's growing, and I think he's made some good adjustments coming to this level from last year, and he's he's more comfortable with his changeup. He's developing a cutter slider, and along with his, you know, plus fastball and curveball, having 4 pitches now, he just has a lot more weapons to execute and to work hitters with.
Yeah, and he's a big prospect, and we saw the game in Charlotte. The first 9 men he faced, he struck out 8 of them, which is incredible.
Yeah, and it was just fun to see that, to see him go out there and just let the ball fly, you know, with where he wanted to throw it. and see what that does for him. So look forward to hopefully us getting the game in tonight with the rain and all that, but watching him perform again.
You know, you mentioned that, and you talk about letting the ball fly, and sometimes young pitchers get a little overly concerned with their mechanics.
Yeah, number one for me is a guy has to have confidence, and he has to have confidence in what he's bringing to the mound that day and the hitters, and to attack the zone with that. And I think when pitchers do that with confidence, even if they get hit, that's how they learn how to pitch. If they back off at all or try to be careful with their pitches, they don't learn to pitch, and the results usually aren't what they're looking for.
Yeah, and they're not pitching with conviction. I mean, you must pitch with conviction, not with hope.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So when you look at a guy, and I would think a big part of your job is instilling confidence in these guys any way you can.
Well, you know, the Pirates talk about the little slogan we have is called hunt the good stuff. And so even when an outing doesn't turn out the way we would like it to turn out, there's some good things in that outing that we can look at and encourage them with and say, hey, keep sharpening that, as well as, you know, the things that didn't turn out their way, poor pitch execution, poor pitch selection maybe, and stuff like that. So there's always something good that we can look at. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in AAA. And so we got to keep developing those things and get guys' confidence in what they do well and keep working at that.
Do you pitched in the big leagues for several years. Do you often talk about that with guys, or how do you handle your own playing career?
I usually don't talk about my playing career with the players unless they ask. What that does for me, though, is I remember what it felt like to be on the mound. I remember how the confidence can go up and down. I remember what it's like to have history with hitters and how to utilize that. And I don't talk about that with them but I use it to help them. I'm like, hey, what'd you do last time with this guy? Do you remember how you pitched him last time? I find that I wasn't a player when I was in their shoes that liked to hear coaches talk about themselves when they pitched, as much as using their experience to help me out with what I have. And that's what I find effective with these guys.
When you prepare a game plan, do you go use the pitcher's strengths, or do you simply say we got to go after the hitter's weaknesses?
Both. I think both are important. I think if I had to pick one, it would be the pitcher's strength, because every pitcher brings something different to the mound, so every pitcher can't attack a hitter the same way. Even though hitters do have tendencies and they have holes in certain parts of the zone, the way a pitcher gets to that might be different. If you're a ground ball pitcher, it might be different than if you're a guy who strikes guys out. And so I think that's what's beautiful about baseball is there's so many variables based on the individuals. And I think learning what those variables are per that person is the art of development and coaching.
One thing that has changed, and we talked to hitting coach Ryan Long about this last week, is that it was always right-hand hitters generally, or high ball hitters, belt high and up, left-hand hitters or low ball hitters. But now with so many guys concerned about launch angle, a lot of right-hand hitters are low ball hitters too.
Yeah, I've heard hitting being taught, you know, to use the upper part of the zone now and use the lower part. So I think hitters have become better low ball in the zone hitters, and now you're seeing the elevated pitches in the big leagues on down more effective. And so there's always the swing going, you know, these changes going on, and I think being competitive is learning how to adapt with those, perceiving what they are, adapting to those so you can counterattack with what, you know, the other side's doing.
It's interesting because now you hear with so many hitters, low ball hitters, let's throw the fastball up and let's throw the curveball. But years ago it was always attack the zone low. Now you can go up with the fastball with a four-seamer.
Right, and you can. And umpires, I mean, they're actually calling the pitch now in the upper part of the zone, so guys that do have good curveballs can execute those, where before the window was so small, it was hard to have that pitch.
One guy we watched who did that years ago when most people weren't when we were young was Jim Palmer, who threw that fastball up all the time. Most guys didn't do it then.
Right. Yeah, they were told not to.
Well, it's hard to catch up with that pitch up, isn't it?
Yeah, you change eye level, and you know, when pitchers can't execute down and up, the more of the zone a hitter has to defend, the tougher it is to hit. And so that's the art of the game, is can pitchers execute in all parts of the zone? If they can't, then hitters know that, and you know, that they can leverage that. So there's this give and take, and I think the guys who execute the best, of course, are the ones who are going to come out on top.
I think that's the game within the game.
Right, exactly.
Brian, as always, thank you so much. Best of luck.
Thank you.
Brian Hickerson, the Indianapolis Indians pitching coach on the home of the Indians, WHMP TV 40. Catcher Jacob Stallings, our next guest on Inside the Indians. And Jacob, let's go back to a game. In the 8th inning, the Indians are down by a few runs. The opposition has the bases loaded, 2 men out, and your pitcher's struggling. The count's 2-0, and you pulled off a pickoff play at first base, and simply terrific to get out of the inning. Tell us about that. What goes into that?
I think for me, the time I look to back pick most is when the pitcher is struggling and in a jam. And, luckily Will was doing a good job and paying attention at first, and their guy had a big lead, and we got the sign down, and I made a good throw, and Will was there, so it just, worked out, and it's good to help out your pitcher when he needs it.
As impressive as that play is, it's even more impressive considering there's a right-hand batter at the plate.
Yeah, it makes it a little tougher for me because I'm not shielded. I don't have that element of surprise as much, but he had a pretty big lead, so we were still able to get it done.
And the base runner's got to be kicking himself because he's going nowhere. He's the trail runner in that situation. And there's a lot of, would you consider it timing involved with you and Will there to get that done?
Yeah, we just kind of have to lock eyes and make sure we're looking at each other and then put the sign on. And, the runner on first is probably thinking, try to get to second as quickly as he can, just to try to make make a ground ball tougher to force him out. But luckily, we were able to backpick him.
I think you do a magnificent job working with a pitching staff. You have great leadership skills. Tell us about your approach with pitchers and what you say to them and how you run things.
I think it depends how well I know them. What my history is with them, obviously how much I've caught them. But each guy's different. A guy I've been with for a long time, I know how to talk to better. I know what I can say to him and what probably I shouldn't say. And then, guys I haven't caught a lot, I just try to feel it out best I can and help them best I can. And each guy's different, so you got to approach each guy a little different.
Is it different, too, approaching guys here than in the major leagues?
I don't think it's a whole lot different. Different in the sense that they're different guys, so you approach it like that, but not because it's AAA in the big leagues. I would say there's more on the line up there in the big leagues, but it's pretty much the same. Same game. You're competing the same way, and so yeah, I would say it's not too much different.
You also call a very good game. I feel that calling a game is the biggest intangible in baseball. Do you agree with that?
I would agree with that. Yeah, it's kind of funny because it's something you can't really measure, and that's what our game has really started to gear itself towards in terms of how we're evaluated. But the pitchers make the pitches. So if you got a good guy up on the mound, you're going to look a lot smarter calling a game. But there's definitely things I feel like I can do sequence-wise to try to help the pitcher out as much as I can to put him in a position to get guys out.
When he believes in you or he believes in the catcher, that gives a pitcher freedom of mind, freedom of thought, freedom of delivery.
Yeah, for sure. I think, like I said, the more history you have with somebody, the more comfortable you are with them. And luckily in this organization, I've been with this organization for a long time, and I'm comfortable and have a long history with a lot of the guys. You
really improved your hitting from your first year to your second year, and it's gotten better and better. Tell us your approach as a hitter.
I try to keep it simple. Whenever I start thinking too much is when I get into trouble. I just, there's small adjustments made every year, every off season, even within the year. But I think just my overall confidence is what has improved. I think in 2016, when I went up to the big leagues in September and had a lot of success there, kind of showed me I can do it. And Ever since then, you know, it's been little tweaks and trying to get better and just reach my potential, work hard every day. And yeah, I mean, it's just try to get better every day and see where the cards fall.
One of the things you'll do is you'll go to right field. And I think that's really good.
Yeah, and especially with two strikes, I try to have a good two-strike approach, and I hate striking out, but you know, it's just one of those things. If there's a whole big field out there, if you're only going to use part of it, you're probably not putting yourself in as good a position to succeed. So I try to use the whole field.
I think it's great you talk about your two-strike approach. You sound a little old school because not in this day and age, not everybody's got that, and they're just swinging from the heels no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you're a guy that has crazy power, then you probably don't need a two-strike, or it's not as worthwhile to have a two-strike approach. But when you're a doubles guy like me who hits home runs occasionally, then you know, putting the ball in play and getting on base is that much more important.
Jacob, thank you so much. Great to see you.
Thanks, Howard.
Jacob Stallings on WHMB TV 40. Thanks to our guests. See you next week on Inside the Indians.